Good evening, dandies. Welcome to Undetermined, the podcast.
We did an episode a while back with Adam Casto from Nerd Table.
Yeah, we've crossed paths a few times. Adam's a cool guy. He's always really kind and
he just like check out this guy's music, and that's how I got the link and was looking into it. And it's like, yeah, it's really good. So he says hello, says nothing but kind things about you. So you're a great guy. So I
shout out to Adam, tastemaker, trendsetter, right? All around Renaissance.
Yeah. And speaking of you are...
hi, I'm Jason Cropper.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, Jason.
Hi, John. Hi, Matt.
Glad to see you doing the show, man. I appreciate it. Just kind of out of the blue thought, wow, it's a really good track, and would you like to do a podcast? And you were all about it. So
rocking. Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to say yes more in my life. I stopped making music over a decade ago, after a decade or so professionally and habitually making it, and I've raised a lot of children. I've been a full-time dad for a long time, and now all my kids have kind of flown the coop, and
no, that's not a distraction at all.
So here I am again, and you guys landed at the perfect time for me to say yes.
I'm glad we
did. On. We get lucky with that every once in a while. Yeah,
we do. So I get, you have a pretty interesting background when it comes to the whole musical scene.
Yes.
Founding member of Weezer.
As odd as it is to say yes to that question for me, it's. I hope it's stranger for me than it is for people listening. I don't know. It's a weird. You have a band that is. I consider them iconic. I consider them one of the coolest bands out there. I saw a TV show that Rivers did the theme music for, a Green Eggs and Ham type of a thing the other day. I mean, he's just really prolific, talented. Everybody in the band is amazing. The lineup they've had with Scott for the past, I think it's like 10 or 12 years or something, is so they're a great live band. And but these songs from this first album just, I have no shame in saying they kind of carry the day, because it's a great album.
Yeah,
the Blue album
absolutely.
It's beautiful. Got to do a first album if you're going to do any others.
They wouldn't be there without the Blue album.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think it's some of the best work too. I mean, in my opinion, but I like a lot of those seminal albums, but from a lot of groups. But how did you? So when did you first start playing music? What was your first exposure to it? What were you? What were you doing?
I grew up in a musical home. My mother has always played piano and sang. She had a Russian classically trained pianist teaching her, and I would go to the lessons as a tot and just sit there and listen to all this Chopin and Bach and Mozart and really cool technical, perfectly played.
Complex stuff.
Yeah. And so that was just there from the get-go, but she also would just belt out Ray Charles and Bob Dylan and Beatles. And then we would just play Johnny Cash records endlessly.
Yeah. So where did you grow up?
I was born in San Francisco at the UCSF Medical Center, and I lived in Berkeley, California from 1971 until 1976.
Okay.
And then Oakland, California until roughly 88. And then I moved to Santa Rosa, California until 91. And then I moved to LA, and I stayed there for a while.
Right on. Yeah, I grew up in a pretty musical household too, but it was a lot different of a story. My dad was a minister. So it was, it was always gospel and things like that. But Southern gospel.
Gospel is where it's at.
Yeah.
I love gospel.
And we were a much more progressive church, much more of a, we had the guitar players and the drummers and, things like that. So We did.
What city and state?
It was in Morrison, Illinois. So a lot of my people, I guess, came from Appalachia in that area, and they were kind of non-denominational, Pentecostal, based. And then when I was, well, it was before I was born, but my dad moved to this little kind of tight-knit Dutch community, and in the Farm Belt, and not a lot of people really went along well with what he was trying to do anyway. They were very, very staunch, kind of Puritan. We were a little bit on the fringe, as far as
Was it like Footloose when they had to ban dancing or something?
right, like that. So, but it was cool that every Sunday I got to hear my dad sing, play tambourine, listen to the band there. I worked the mixing board and stuff in the church, and so music was a big part of our life. But rock and roll was kind of on the down low for us as kids for a while, anyway, until my parents realized that they weren't going to get away from it.
Honestly, I think what really clicked it in, there were three basic works that clicked it in for me. I loved records. Like I was crazy about Jimi Hendrix and Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin and all that, like 10, 11, 12, really started getting into that kind of music. But then The Wall by Pink Floyd.
Change your life, man.
Purple Rain
Mm-hmm.
by Prince. And this is kind of an outlier, but if you've never seen it, anyone who's listening, just stop what you're doing. Come back to the podcast after you watch it, because The Blues Brothers is one of the greatest rock and roll movies. Where gospel comes in. Right?
Yeah, we had a big conversation about the Blues Brothers the other day.
Sharpstar, I think we were talking with them about that. Yeah.
We're on a mission from God.
Yeah, totally.
Save the orphanage, right?
Save the planet. No,
save something. Save your soul.
Save the country. Goodness, yeah. Anyway, I grew up in a fairly musical household as well. My dad was a singer, songwriter, played guitar, kind of folksy country. So I grew up just listening to that a lot, and then. He professed to like country, but never really listened to any country music. He was usually just making his own music. And then my mom, on the other hand, we got like a steady diet of the Beatles and ABBA and Neil Diamond.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I still love Neil Diamond to this day.
Neil Diamond's amazing. I work. I'm one of his vendors.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he has this amazing studio hidden. I'm not going to say where, but in a very totally obvious location in West Hollywood area, Beverly Hills area. And I work with a family that do a father and a son team that have done a lot of mixing and recording for him over the years. I kind of hooked up with them while I was working at a recording studio in Los Angeles called Ocean Way, which is, I think they now call it Universal, or it was started by Bill Putnam, who, famous recording technology engineer, early engineer, and beautiful rooms. Met a lot of people, helped, just in the background, taking out the trash on a lot of records.
Wow. That'd be fascinating.
Cleaning the toilet on the Radiohead record, taking out the trash on the Avenged Sevenfold record. Those are my credits. Right?
That's pretty sweet, though. Yeah, I'd totally do that. I
remember Radiohead was making a record. I think it was "Hail to the Thief," and they were, they could do no wrong. And I've had some funny run-ins and little misadventures with Tom York over the years, but I remember he was, weeping into the microphone, and everything was very quiet. And I was out in the hallway, like sweeping or vacuuming or something. And I could hear his voice coming through the speakers, and it was very, it was poignant and sad and sensitive, as he, will get. And I love his work, but I couldn't help but kind of chuckle, like, wow, you know, like he could fart into the microphone and people would buy it. Would be like, yeah, this is genius.
Oh my God. It's the greatest fart I've ever heard. Right.
It's real.
You could just feel the air passing between his cheeks.
No, and he and I had some fun. We had another fun cross. You know, our paths crossed earlier. I think it was like maybe winter of '97. I was in Paris doing a little residency at a little sort of American rock club on the Champs-Elysees. This is, you know, late in the Chopper 1 game, and which was not a long game, but it was a game nonetheless as far as post Weezer bands that I've done. And we were in the lobby of a hotel somewhere along the rue, where the sex clubs are. And Radiohead was staying there. They were doing a record at a place called William Tell. And it was I think a follow-up to, it was like maybe their third record or something around that time. And they were having breakfast in the little dining room at the hotel. And we went in there, and my wife, Amy Wellner at the time, my first wife, she's who was in the band, she had been talking to Tom in the little dining area, and she had said something to him that had pissed him off, and I walked in as he tells her off.
Oh man.
And the other guys in the band like all immediately stood. They saw me walk in, and they all immediately stood up and like looked at me like, please don't get involved. Don't do it. I know that's your wife. Just really nice guys.
Oh no. That would be an awkward position.
I still wonder to this day if she like propositioned him and he turned her down, or what. Like, I don't know.
You'd almost have to shift the blame to her in your own imagination, just because it's like it's like it's like there's a hero of yours, but it's like, oh my God, do I defend her honor? I don't know. Maybe she didn't do something honorable, so it's dishonorable.
Maybe he just wanted to enjoy his breakfast in peace, and it didn't matter what she said. I don't know.
Or maybe she's just thinking, okay, if we can get the tabloids, the band will take off.
You know, she kind of operated with that playbook in hand. I don't know if it was intentional. Yeah.
Jason just gets in a fight with Tom Gore. Oh my gosh.
Done. Yes. Now we're in jail.
We'll be on the front page.
And a publicist.
People are going to find out who you are. That's for sure.
Yeah. So I have a lot of war stories from those recording studio days about, just artists coming and going in and out of the studio. Like, for instance, the way I got the job at the recording studio, Chopper 1 had finished a tour with the band Goldfinger, still friends with Darren Pfeiffer, who does a podcast. You guys should meet. You probably would enjoy talking with him. He does a lot of cool stuff. So we were on the road with Goldfinger. We finished up the tour, got back to Los Angeles, and it was one of those no money, no job, no house, no place to live, a wife and a kid who promptly left to go, live with grandma until I could summon the fortitude to create a new home. And so I was driving bands to and from the airport and the studio and the hotel and the venue for a cartage company as a road manager type guy. And do you remember the band from the 90s? They had a really fabulous #1 hit song, Tonic.
Yeah. If you could only see the way. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Everybody knows that song if you were awake in the 90s. And so I was moving their gear around. They didn't ride in the car with me, but if you're listening, Tonic guys, hi. I used to have your gear in Los Angeles. And so I'm wheeling their gear in and out of Ocean Way for the umpteenth time to go to a fabulous mix producer engineer, a guy named Jack Joseph Puig, who's made a lot of great records, Black Crows, name drop session here for Jack Joseph Puig. Okay. He's amazing. You should have him on. And
we work by referrals a lot. So,
and you might as well hashtag these guys, and we can see if anyone will show up.
Absolutely.
So I'm pushing all this gear into this place, and I'm working at this like minimum wage job, doing really difficult rock and roll labor, and a really great guy, Ernie Woody, who used to be the general manager at Ocean Way Studios and is now the general manager of Ocean Way Loudspeakers, which is owned by Alan Sides, who coined the phrase "1 billion records sold out of Ocean Way," because they did like "We Are the World" there. They did.
Oh wow, yeah,
like a lot of big records in the 80s. And then Ernie says to me, "Hey, are you looking for a job?" And I was like, "Yeah." And it was great because he gave me a decent paying job, and I could support my family and stay working in the music business, but not in a sleazy fashion. No offense to people who've done sleazy stuff in the music business. And I just would help people set up equipment for their recordings. And it was, again, another beautiful, very lucky, a very, very fortunate series of years. Rick Rubin was a big client of Alan's at the time at Ocean Way, and Quincy Jones and Dr. Dre, and, people who, and a lot of other people who make fabulous records to this day. And so I just got to kind of be around that and pretend I was learning how to make records.
That's awesome, and I think when you love something enough, when it means something to you, like I'm a terrible musician, but I fucking love music. You will find a way to be close to it.
It's important. Yeah. Your passion will feed your soul if you allow it to.
Yeah.
At least your soul. Maybe your body too.
So I got to ask, it's almost become an inside joke at this point, but any Tom Waits stories?
Yeah, we always have to ask about that.
He does a lot of recording at a little place in Cotati, which is outside of Santa Rosa in Northern California. Because I lived in Santa Rosa for a while, I remember hearing about, Tom Waits is in town. He's doing a show at this club called the Cotati Cabaret or the Luther Burbank Performing Center of the Arts. These little, kind of community center type nightclub situations. And he apparently has been and is still really fond of this recording studio in Northern California.
Oh, is it Prairie Sun?
Prairie Sun.
Yes. Okay. So we've got a former guest, John Axtell. He was in Psychofunkopus.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
He had a story about running into Tom Waits at Prairie Sun a couple of times. Yeah.
That's right. Local legend.
Yeah, it just seems like kind of funny we always ask that, because it seems like everybody that we've spoken to, anybody out of anyone who's recorded in California anyway, always has a Tom Waits story for us.
A true original.
He is that guy. I believe that entirely.
Yeah, I couldn't compare him to anybody.
No way.
Not fairly.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah,
love him or not.
Yeah, you've got to respect him. Regardless of whether you enjoy him.
You know what's interesting about that? Fungo. Do you say Fungo Mungo or Psychofunkopus?
Psychofunkopus, but they're friends,
right? Yeah. Well, so when I was a kid, after I left Oakland and I lived in Santa Rosa with my father up there, without meaning to, just the local kids that I hung out with there in Santa Rosa had all grown up going to punk rock shows and all ages shows all around the North Bay and in the Bay Area. And the Gilman Street was really popular. I got to see Green Day at the Gilman Street, and then at the basement radio station at Sonoma State University with like 3 other people there with the original drummer. Hidden bands that people don't really know about or talk about, if they do, like Victims Family or No Means No.
Yep.
Kind of coming up in the in the wake of Minor Threat, and more West Coast bands as well. There were really brilliant bands that nobody's ever heard of. I can't even find it. There was a band called Spot 1019 from that era.
Yeah, I don't know that one. I'll have to look that one up.
If you can, there's some videos out there. I don't know if any of their masters. They had great records, and it seems to me that in Northern California, beyond San Francisco, if you go into Marin and you go to kind of some of the Grateful Dead head clubs like Phil Lesh's place, or you go into some of the all ages punk rock places, you're still to this day going to find this exceptional level of musicianship and dedication to the craft without a care for commercialization, without a care for, hey, let's go get a record deal, let's go get famous. It's just, no, this is the real thing. And we're in Northern California and this is where we live and play. And why would we want to go anywhere else?
Yeah. I mean, looking at like some of those bills from Berkeley Square, and talking about that before with, I don't know if you're familiar with like Mike Silverman, that one guy who goes by, plays the magic pipe, out of there, and he was sharing that one night on his Radio One Guy show. Just it's amazing how many of these acts that were just all there at once.
Yeah, it was just such a great trip down memory lane, and wishing we could have been there at that time instead of stuck in the Midwest.
Yeah,
not that there weren't some cool things happening here, but not on that level, on that scale.
I would imagine there's been some amazing scenes in and out of, and from time to time in the Midwest that will compete with anything that has come out of California.
Oh, John and I gripe all the time about bands that should have been huge that we used to see all the time. Right. Back in the late 80s, early 90s. The Urge. Oh man, if you liked some hardcore ska, that band just killed it.
Yeah, they made a name for themselves. I remember the Urge. Do they still
play?
They
still do shows every now and then.
Yeah, they do. Yep.
That makes sense.
Yep. Well, and I mean, too, Chicago, of course, a big city, but still a Midwestern city. And you look at what came out of Wax Trax Records and stuff in the 80s and like the industrial scene. And that was a pretty kind of weird pocket, too, for a place like Chicago, for all those bands to kind of generate out of there. It just didn't seem to fit, I don't know what was really coming out of there. Well, I guess like Enough's Enough and stuff like that were coming out of there around that area. They were from like Blue Island. They were a Chicago type band, but yeah. And I think if it wasn't for those kind of swells though, because when you look at some of those bills, like we were talking about at Berkeley Square, you got Primus playing, Fungo Mungo, Mordred, and you'd see all these acts, just back to back for like what today would be like a $100 concert ticket. We're playing for like a $5 bill, and but there were so many, Mr. Bungle and some of the earlier groups that were getting together at that time. Just it was just a big swell of them all at once. It just seemed like, and still kind of all over the place with style, or category, or
Well, we're talking about a time before there was a format known as alternative rock radio.
Yep.
Right? It was still college radio, sort of, and it hadn't been commercialized into. I mean, there were a few places where people were doing it, but they were they were outliers.
I was in radio, kind of in that period, and again, going back to talking about you find a way to get close to it. That was my way to get close to it. I worked at like this little bitty radio station in Springfield, Missouri, and it was basically like this just crap station. You couldn't pick it up maybe more than 25 miles away. And it was just a kid who his dad owned the station, and it wasn't a moneymaker. And the kid was like, "Dad, please let me just do this," and he talked his dad into letting him throw up this radio station that just played really alternative. But when I was there, like the rules were so different from any other radio experience I've had. And it was you play whatever you want. Don't play the same song twice in your shift.
Right.
Make sure it's not like cursing, so the FCC is going to get on to us. And oh my gosh, that kind of freedom.
Yeah.
Ooh, that was power. That was exciting.
And Matt, before it was alternative, there was obviously college radio, but they called it modern rock radio.
Yeah.
Right? That was kind of the format in the 80s that like in the Bay Area, we had the Quake, and obviously in Los Angeles, there's some really famous stations that still go under. Right, K-Rock is super important in that format.
Oh, K-Rock's legendary.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And there was K-Fog in the Bay Area. It's still there, but K-Fog was like this really cool station that they would play the Pretenders, and then they would play the Talking Heads, and then they would play the Who, and then they would play Prince, and then they would play Bruce Springsteen, and then they would play U2. And it was just a freeform thing for rock music.
I love that.
Yeah. But yes, that's pretty cool. I mean, it's just that you didn't see that. I mean, if it wasn't for that going on with Channel Z and the Planet where you were at, Matt. I mean, just that little window when you realize how much kind of that it was barely hanging on by a thread. But
right, and I just thought, man, this is so cool. How can it not get huge?
There wouldn't have been a scene, what we call alternative today. There wouldn't have been an alternative scene in that town if it wasn't for that station, I don't think.
Wow.
And you're talking what? There's 80,000 people back then, probably, or so.
Yeah, probably something. Again,
not a huge city, but
our part of the country, there's not a lot. Or there, especially at that time, there wasn't. Now you can find stuff all over the place. We've got the internet. Anything you want to listen to, you can find it.
Sure.
But
maybe too much information.
Right. Back when John and I were kids, you'd sometimes have to drive a couple of hours to go anywhere that had any kind of selection of music. And then it was like, okay, I read an article about these guys. It sounds like something I might like. I like the cover. Yep. All right, let's see what happens.
You had to go out and quest for it and hunt for it. You had to earn it.
You worked for it, and man, sometimes you got burned.
But when you found something you liked, it became something that you would hold on to for probably
absolutely.
The band.
Yeah, and those are some of the fondest memories, and some of them. Like you wanted so much to like it that you almost kind of convinced yourself you did, even when deep down. No, not really. It's not that good, right? It's 30 years later now, and I'm still not playing that one again. I might sometime just for a trip down memory lane, but I don't really want to listen to it.
Sure. Well, seasonal or trendy or whatever, as opposed to a mainstay, an iconic, a definitive record as far as one's identity as a music lover.
Right. I could tell you like a dozen hair bands that I told myself I liked, but have I listened to them anytime? Nope.
But one funny thing about that is, though, just like you're saying, is like it's funny that people kind of shit on fashion, and in the early 90s it became kind of an anti-fashion thing for a lot of bands to dress down or not, they're not going to wear the Zubaz pants anymore or the leather jackets. But when you didn't have access to that music, and you're, say, a 14-year-old kid, you kind of had to look at the look. You had to look at these guys in magazines, kind of imagine what they sounded like. And you got burned sometime, but fashion was a part of it too. It was a big part.
True. And I think a lot of people, for a lot of guys, back then it was, well, are there going to be girls at the concert?
Yep.
What?
No. I go to church to meet girls.
Oh, there you go. Keep it family oriented. Sure. I saw a film of Metallica playing Day on the Green at Oakland. It was right after the Black Album had dropped. I think it was 1991, and it's like 300 to 1. Right. Great, good. Fun. No, awesome, great concert.
Huh. Well, I saw Metallica a couple of times. I had to follow them around the Midwest. That was kind of hard. I mean, we would go. Sometimes you'd have about a 6-hour round trip. To go to a show. Like a city was about 3 hours away. And drive there, and at 1 o'clock in the morning, you'd have to leave, and hope to God your driver wasn't too wasted to, get you back home by 5 in the morning.
Wow.
But yeah, if we followed a band, like I considered that I followed Metallica one summer, and it's because I went to 3 different shows, but they were very hard to get to. You know?
Well, you probably got your
Yeah,
fill.
yeah. Well, especially with
I never understood people who just followed bands like the Deadheads. I just
Oh,
get tired of it.
that's sacrosanct. That's important. People following the
yeah,
dead. It's still happening, even though they're called something else now, and Jerry's not there. It's almost a spiritual. I mean, it's like going to church. It's like a gospel in a way for many of them. I think that's not an
yeah,
exaggeration.
No,
Is
I'm sure that's how it is. For me, it just seems like at some point it would feel painful to me, I think.
yeah.
yeah.
Is that
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
bad
yeah,
attitude? I don't
no,
know.
not at all. I think it's okay to be critical. I will tell you, as a boy in Oakland, I remember I was 13. It it was around Valentine's Day. I was down by Lake Merritt. It was raining. There was lightning. It was nighttime. The Grateful Dead used to play at the Henry J. Kaiser Convention Center, and the parking lot area would fill up with buses and vans, and there was a village, a veritable town, if you will, where you could get anything. And a friend of mine told me, hey, walk through the parking lot, go there tonight and walk through the parking lot with your hand open slowly, and just walk through and just smile and see what ends up in your hand when you get to the other side. And it was amazing. I had a ticket and about the equivalent of a sheet of acid from in just little, like, here, you can have 3 of these. Here, you can have 5 of those. Here, you can have, and a
right,
joint.
and
It's
never had to say a
incredible.
word, huh? Just smile and
Just
nod.
smile.
Huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That would be
yeah,
interesting.
good social experiment. As long as it didn't all, leak through in your sweat and into your hand. And
So I think that, and I can't say this from a lot of personal experience, but from that one experience, I can say that I believe that the people who are following bands around, there's something much more to it than the
oh,
music,
absolutely.
that
Yeah.
they just are craving some sense of extended family and finding it, hopefully, in a way that is almost, I mean, there's like, I don't know. It must be like traveling in a caravan across the desert in like Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist,
Right.
or something like
Yeah.
that, a fabled
Yeah.
journey.
And I can certainly respect that. And I hope I didn't sound like I was shitting on anything. It just, for me, no, I got to have something different. I like,
Matt, you're fine. Just stay home and just Netflix it, man.
no, I don't want to do that either.
I see what you mean, though, but it's like, putting it into the context that it is like a church. It's like not every Christian goes to church just for the sermon. It's not why they're there.
That's
They're
true.
there for all sorts of things, potlucks, and the community, and seeing so and so, and making plans with the person.
And meeting a prospective
Right,
mate,
right.
maybe.
Yep. Off of Craigslist, or I guess it depends on the church.
So the band is more of an excuse,
Yeah,
in a way.
It's a focal point, but there's something gathered around. There's a community gathered around it that's also having its own unique experience.
Right. And without the community, it would not be,
Right.
the appeal might not be there as much.
What an amazing space to find oneself as a band, right? It's just incredible what did happen with the Dead, and what is still kind of going on, whether you look at Fish or the jam band circuit in general, and the festivals that are around that, or
Sure.
company. It is a unique lifestyle and phenomenon in rock and roll, whatever you want to call this, pop music.
yeah. It even carries over to, cover bands. I mean, we've got the swag here in Missouri that, remember them had Camp Zoe, and
Yeah.
eventually their campground got shut down. But there was enough of a following and a family there, and they were a Dead cover band, but they had a big farm down in southern Missouri and a bunch of acreage, and free camping, and it was kind of a communal lifestyle and things like that. But it carried over so much that even when it wasn't really the Dead, there's this, these swag followers, and you go down to that camp and play the camp every weekend, and in the summer, and cops eventually crack down on them to run the camp down.
For anybody who's interested in what the Grateful Dead was like, or what's going on in that scene, and would like to have an experience, and you don't want to go to a big concert, there's a place in Marin County that Phil Lesh, the previous and sometimes on again, off again bass player of the Grateful Dead, I think he had he was having liver failure, some sort of serious health problems, and he kind of got a second chance, but he couldn't go on the road. He got a liver transplant. So he opened up a nightclub in Marin called Terrapin Crossroads, and it's very intimate. It sounds amazing. It's really fun to go and just, if you want to try, on for size without a big commitment in an intimate place. And some amazing musicians who have come up through that world who gather around him and his cohorts, and there are guest stars, and it's just it's always something different. It's a really cool place to go and have that, rock and roll experience.
All right. I should try it.
Yeah. It sounds better than Cabo Wabo to me.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I like Sammy Hagar.
I would do that too.
I'd go there too.
I have a Sammy Hagar story.
Excellent.
Oh, do you? Let's hear it.
I was at a record label publishing company's office in Los Angeles for a meeting, trying to get an advance on royalties or something. And there was a songwriting session, and it was it was Sammy. He was there, and Lisa Marie Presley, if I'm not mistaken.
Interesting.
And they were doing it, and Sammy was. I mean, he really works hard too. He had a little towel around his neck and was sweating a lot. And it was like, wow, he just gets worked up, and to get his voice up into those registers where he can sing, which is really intense and powerful and big and high. And I was blown away. I mean, it was starstruck. Right?
He's still doing that in his 70s.
He's amazing.
Yeah, that is wild.
People give him a bad rap, But
no, not here.
Oh,
anybody that's listened to me, nope.
Yeah,
I'm Sammy all the way.
Yeah.
Right on. That's you don't hear that as often as you should. Or
better showman, better voice, better songwriter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can sling an axe.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Write songs.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tequila.
Yep.
Tequila.
Entrepreneur.
Pound cake.
He's got a rum now too, I think.
Wow.
Does he? But yeah, people always say that about like the Van Halen camp, and whether you're a Dave fan or a Sammy fan. I at least say I give them equal billing.
I love them both.
I do too, and I don't see any problem with that. It's not like a full.
I enjoy them both.
Me too. It's like, I don't see why we have to pick a side there.
You don't have to.
Yep.
I felt kind of bad for Gary Cherone. Is that his from
Cherone? Yeah,
he got
that dude.
That was like bad luck for him. It just didn't seem like it worked out, or something. I mean, he got the gig, but then it wasn't. People were like, no. I guess.
I think. What screwed him and Extreme just as a whole was More Than Words.
Which was an amazing song and a huge.
It was a great song, but that's all anybody thought of when they heard them, and they got so overplayed.
Right.
And Nuno Betancourt, one of the best musicians ever at rock guitar, just one of the best. Yeah. Truly,
and that band was an incredible band.
Really good.
Sure.
I was a huge Extreme fan.
Mm-hmm. Nuno designs
who I've
guitars
been
too.
digging lately, in kind of in that vein, but a little like if I told you there's a guy who can sing like Chris Cornell and play like Stevie Ray Vaughan and Nuno Betancourt, would you know who I was talking about? It's Ian Thornley of the Canadian band Big Wreck. And if you're a fan of any of these, like any of those, like Soundgarden, yes, he does it. Stevie Ray Vaughan, oh yeah, he can play like that. Shredding, like Van Halen era greatest, like he can play like Yngwie if he wants. He's that.
I'm gonna have to check that out.
And writes really good songs, and he has a really good band, and they've been going at it for like 20 years. And I saw him in a club that holds 300 people in San Francisco the other night. It's one of the best shows I've seen all year.
Yeah.
That's one of those awesome things when people don't recognize what a really good band is sometimes. Mm-hmm. And you get these little treats. Speaking of Canadian bands, John and I both really like the Tea Party.
Oh, yeah, great.
Are you familiar with them?
I got to get turned on to them.
Yeah. Edges of Twilight is where I would start.
Fire in the Head. Start with that track. It's good.
Yeah. It's, oh my God. The Doors meets Led Zeppelin meets Soundgarden. It's
wow. The Tea Party.
The Tea Party. Yeah,
the Tea Party.
Kind of an unfortunate name with modern political climate.
Yeah, the band name was around before the political party.
Long before.
To be fair.
Yeah.
And they're Canadian.
Well, pinky up or pinky down.
Right. Yeah.
But I got to see them opening for, this was, in mid to late 90s. Yeah. I saw them opening for Creed in a club in St. Louis.
Oh, that must have crushed.
Yeah.
Oh, they killed
Creed. Yeah. Yep, they would have.
And Creed was a great band. Yeah. Creed was a really, really good band. I don't care like people would listen to Creed and cry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah. Their arms wide open. But yeah.
Totally.
But we talked about that before too, me and Matt Ab, just about the Canadian curse. And it's almost harder, it seems like, for some Canadian bands just to break the states when they're right on the border,
There's I found out some really interesting stuff, and this is just kind of rumor and conjecture, but apparently the Canadian government has a very generous arts program.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are, educated and or working as an artist and are able to do the right grant paperwork with the Canadian government and are in good standing, you can basically get a cash infusion every year to keep your art business band funded, and even at a loss after many years, as long as you're adding some value to the Canadian culture.
God, I wish we had something like that here.
Yeah.
And again, I'll bring Darren Pfeiffer's name back up because he somehow obtained, I think, dual citizenship, and I'm sure that's a great story. But and I think he does some production work, and I think he knows how this works. And I agree. I think that the land that invented rock and roll ought to have you're an artist. Great, go over there. Don't go to the math school, right? Or don't go to the auto mechanic school. Go to the rock star school, because we need more people to do that and be supported doing it, so they don't. But then again, it's important to kind of starve and struggle, because then that informs maybe some better songs.
Sure, but then as Americans, we always bitch about the lack of of a good pool of. It's like we have such amazing resources to do.
We're spoiled.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, but we don't encourage it. We don't encourage it academically or, socially. I've dabbled in just about, and talked about it before, but we've dabbled in just about everything, every element of art, from visual art to singing, playing guitar, to, painting. But it was always one of those things that it's like, just do that in your spare time. You don't want to try to. I mean, there were no grants that I knew of, or at least in my little town in Illinois, that I was going to ever get into any art school. Is going to be significant enough. But yeah, Canada's got some great acts, and I don't know what that is that they just can't. It's getting better with the internet now that you can start to look things up. But I mean, I've just been blown away by these acts like We Are the City, the Pack AD, and so many people I talk to are just like, who's this again? They hear them and, wow, it's really amazing. Pigeonhole for hip hop. They've got some great hip hop out of Canada.
Yeah, yeah. And they're starting to have more crime in Canada.
Yeah. It's probably the hip hop's fault.
No. I think, I mean, there have been, organized crime is, running its game and its businesses, whether it's offshore or domestic or whatever.
Sure.
I think, and, the legalization of marijuana there before it happened here to a certain extent has been interesting.
Yeah.
An experiment in ways.
Yeah. Well, especially going federal up there.
Right.
Yep. That was ballsy.
Yep.
For an entire country.
Is Broken Social Scene Canadian? I think they are.
Well, you guys know all the. You guys are hip. You guys are beyond my capability. Can you send me a list of all these bands?
Yeah, I'll do that. Absolutely.
That would be great.
Check out Broken Social Scene, regardless of whether they're Canadian or not. I'm pretty sure they are. They're worth checking out too.
Checking them out. I'm pulling up a bunch of Spotify tabs.
Yeah.
Broken Social.
Dude, no, this is how John and I get all this. Is just talking to people and check this out. Yeah. We're still old school that way.
That's it. I mean, these are the type of conversations that knit a society together. You guys are in the Midwest. I'm on the West Coast, but here we are finding a lot of common ground and enjoying it. And it's important. I think probably now more than ever, as things seemingly are. Did they point us toward the divisive pond and break off the emergency brake and the car
right
down the hill?
Yeah.
No, but it looks like it. I think
it's a great tabloid, right? It makes a great television.
Yeah, unfortunately, the loudest voices are much more of a minority than they realize. I think
it's getting harder and harder to decipher too exactly what's going on versus what's put out there just to piss everybody off. It's
an amazing, and you can tell how we're talking about it. And we're kind of dancing,
right? Because you don't know.
There's one thing I wish that the kids today. I hope that the kids who are coming of voting age now, if there's one lesson as a citizen of a democracy, however fractured or lopsided or hijacked or whatever's happening, it's always important to remember that if you have to make a choice between the lesser of two evils in a vote, for instance, then to do it, right? To show up and to choose the lesser of two evils as opposed
That's a good point. Yeah.
Because people get fed up, they get burnt out, or they won't vote. And I think in some democratic institutions, there are devices such as none of the above, right? But if there's two candidates, or you want A or B or none of the above, and if none of the above wins, then they immediately have to have a referendum, and there are two new candidates waiting to come in to run, or something like that. We don't do that, and the two-party system polarizes it further.
I would love to see the two-party system just broken up. I'd love to have like a tiered voting system. My first choice, my second choice, third choice, and tally them all up.
Well, another thing we were talking about just a couple of weeks ago when we were talking to Hamish from Quarterzine.
Another one to check out.
Who's Australian, and making voting compulsory.
Okay.
And then we'll truly see. It's just like that's another thing that just drives me bonkers is seeing election results over, even if it's just minor things in say like a tax levy or something like that, and finding out that 3% of the population came out to vote on that, Prop 1 or Prop 2, and it changes everything in the law books. It's like 3% of the people made that decision. And then seeing headlines that say like, an overwhelming number of people in Columbia, Missouri voted for no, an overwhelming percentage of 12% of the people did. And I mean, it's the same way with federal elections. And looking at the presidency and everything else, it's like that's still only a representation of what's average of voter turnout? It's like 40% or something like that in the last.
What's the Margaret Mead quote? Never doubt that a small group
Right.
of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world.
Yep.
Indeed, it's
the only thing that ever has.
They can, yeah. Or Nelson Mandela said, it always seems impossible until it's done.
Right. Yeah. And what was the Gandhi one? First they laugh at you.
Right.
First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then you win, or something like
right, something like that.
But it would be interesting to see. I think just that we were all just required to vote. And I mean, as kind of, he was joking a little bit about what they call the donkey vote, which is people just coming in and like drawing pictures of dicks on the ballot, just because they're forced to do it.
Sure. And you could tie it to who was it? There was the motor voter movement, right?
I remember that. Yeah.
And you could even tie it to the common sense concept of, hey, you want to drive, you have to vote,
right? And
then give people the none of the above option, so they feel like they have they don't have to. They can say, well, I don't want either of these lesser. There isn't a lesser of two evils. The lesser of two evils is someone I don't have on this page.
And maybe we would find that it wouldn't change much. Maybe there are only 40% of us that are decided anyway, and the other 60% would just be the donkey vote. But I don't know. I think that, I think we'd see a lot more in this country just because I think there are a lot of people who are disenfranchised who, just fighting hard to get to the polls, or just you're uneducated about voting.
Now, do you guys run into a lot of divisive, like outward-facing divisiveness or hatred or whatever it is, like in terms of, red versus blue or conservative versus Republican, or
mostly from the red side?
Yeah, in our area, it's area specific. I call Columbia, where I live, Columbia, Missouri is right smack in the middle of the state. So we are where there's, how many colleges are there here now? Like 4 or 5, something like that.
6, 7. Yeah, a bunch.
Yeah. We call it the Blue Island because whenever you look at a voter map, the whole place is red except for my county. Right.
Is it gerrymandered?
Not really. It's just, this is where, a lot of the state is, a lot of the.
Sure.
But as far as us, we're where the university is, where the more progressives live. And you've got Kansas City on one side, you've got St. Louis on the other side, and then you've got Columbia right in the middle, which is a blue dot in a sea.
And apparently Springfield's becoming a little more blue.
Yeah, a little more. And some of those things are changing. I still think, though, I don't know, it's more obvious. You said whether it's overt or it's still a lot of it's just being spread online, kind of,
a lot of it. Yeah, it's moved to social media, but at the same time, the further away you get from the blue areas, the easier it is to see a lot of hate, even if they don't realize that's what they're doing. Like it's really easy to find the stars and bars, flying out front.
Seeing a lot of Confederate flags.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I grew up in Oakland, California, which is, the birthplace of the Black Panther.
Right. No, those are terrorists around here.
Oh yeah. Right.
Yeah. Right. And it's just ignorance.
Absolutely.
Around an experience that, and I can barely even speak to it as a white male. I think I have enough humility and common sense to know that I don't know what that's like. Mm-hmm. And it's got to be incredibly difficult.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Beyond what a privileged white person in a country run by
and that's the truth of it. You'll never be able to find out.
No. That's the one thing I try, somebody, I've got family members or people in social media, everything else is just, there's no such thing as white privilege. I have to work hard. I always have to tell those people, you're confusing privilege with wealth. they're not the same thing. They're not the same thing at all. And the reason why you're not going to recognize that you're privileged as a white person is because these are things that you take for granted. These are things that are, just granted to you throughout your life. Your ability to flag down a cab, your ability to walk home through a neighborhood at 2:00 in the morning.
Right. The policeman or your friend if you're not doing anything wrong.
Right.
Yeah. No, I took advantage of that a couple of years ago. I was at a friend's party and somebody had accidentally broken some bottles on the street on the way in. And it was kind of a rough neighborhood of Oakland.
Right.
And the landlord or the super at the apartment building got upset because we were making too much noise at this sort of loft party. And he called the cops. I heard him do it through the wall because it was very thin walls, right? We were making too much noise and everybody was quiet. And I heard him like, hello, yeah, come to this address, blah, blah. And the police didn't come. And somehow he convinced a highway patrolman to come. I don't know if the police sent the highway patrolman or whatever. And a friend of mine went out front for a cigarette break. And the reason I knew that the highway patrolman had come is because he was there shining a spotlight on the back of my car and writing something down or looking up the license plate or something. And I don't know what possessed me to do this, but I stood in the line of sight of the highway patrolman and I kind of waved my hand back and forth in front of my face. And he looked up at me, and it's night. And he looked up at me, and I just made the motion like, you can go, like just waving both my hands, like it's fine, you can go.
Make sure you're
right? And right, exactly, like it's okay now. It's
I got this.
And yeah, don't worry about it anymore. And he kind of shrugs his shoulders, puts his pen down, turns off his searchlight, and drives away. And my friend who was out there for the cigarette, but he was like, "Wow, that was like a Jedi mind trick. How'd you do that?" I was like, I had to try.
Yeah.
Right?
What's the worst that could happen apart from getting shot?
Right. Yeah. If you're with the wrong color. Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, I mean, it's just by its very nature. That's the thing that people. It's like, of course, you don't recognize that you're privileged.
Well, and us laughing about it is not recognizing it.
I was just thinking while I'm saying that we're laughing, but it's really pretty fucking sad.
It's not funny.
Yeah, it is sad.
Yeah, it's fucked up.
Yeah.
It's we're living in a penitentiary system, whether you measure it by how much taxes come out of your paycheck at the end of every week, or pick away, right? What kind of gas do you want to put in your car? Well, there are 3 flavors and 20 companies, but that's it, right? If you want a different kind of car, you're gonna have to break out of the system to get it, to have wealth or get the conversion with the the biofuel, or you can't get one that runs on water, even though that's possible.
Right.
I guess. I don't know. I probably sound like a crackpot for saying that.
No, absolutely not. I mean, yeah, it's only taking off now. They had so many energy options that we could have done. I mean, you hear so many people down talking things like solar that have been being perfected and worked on for the last 40 years and making it sound like it's some newfangled,
Right.
gross idea. It's like,
I heard a beautiful statistic about solar power the other day. It was the equivalent, I'm going to look it up, equivalent of barrels of oil in solar power per day.
Wow.
And it's an incredible disparity, right? It's like 25 million barrels of oil get used per day or something like that. There's some number on
Right. It's an insane number.
But there's something like the equivalent of 1 trillion barrels of oil shining on the earth every day.
yeah, that we're just not
With solar and wind. Right.
It's like just hidden in plain sight. Like all we have to do is just focus on using that, and we'll figure it out.
We essentially have our own like perpetual motion machine. We don't have to do all the things that we're doing. There's no need.
We can do something else.
Yeah.
We could do something else.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And the sad thing is so many times you hear it with alternate forms of energy, people throwing in the yeah buts. whenever you mention like, well, I live right next to a river. Why can't we run a hydro system? Yeah, but it's going to get filled with moss and you got to clean it. Or, talking about wind, and yeah, but it doesn't store very well. Wind doesn't blow all the time. Or solar, how people are basically, once you get it up, you're practically paying into the grid almost, or the grid's paying you back practically immediately. You're just paying for the construction, installation, just the setup. But it's so expensive to do. It's like,
right.
But there's none of those buts when it comes to just, polluting the shit out of the planet, burning up something that costs, $3 to $5 a gallon, depending on where you live. On an engine that's constantly wearing down, breaking, and costing you tons of money in repairs. It's like, you don't get any of those buts.
Status quo. That's status quo.
Right. And I also kind of want to say, but the gas price tripled when we had an oil baron president. You know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what are the hidden costs of all of this? How do we, I think in our economic system, a balance sheet or an economic forecast, as you zoom out and you look at, what are the costs of, for example, here in California with PG&E, I'm sure you've seen in the news where they're like, oh, we got sued last time there were fires. So this time when it gets windy, we're going to turn off the electricity in those areas. And then a fire starts in that area and there's no electricity for people to get the evacuation notice or go to the gas station and pump gas to then leave, right?
God.
And you can't win for losing. And people are vilifying this electric utility, which is really just smart people doing the best they can in an almost impossible to win environment. They don't want to hurt anybody.
We're so wired to find the thing to be pissed off about. And I'm pissed off about that.
Right.
Well said.
Exactly. Well, that's never going to work. Well, do you have anything constructive to offer then? What will? I mean, there's got to be some other options. And you can find all sorts of information about what everybody doesn't want to do, but not a lot of information about what they do.
They're really good at telling you what you're doing wrong and what everybody else is doing wrong. And that, that's basically the power structure that we have right now. The people that are in power got there by telling you what everybody else was doing wrong and how I'm way better. Look at all the bad things they're doing. I'm going to fix it. And that's the only solution they have is I'm going to fix it. No details.
No plan.
I'm going to get the best people. I'm going to get the best people and we're going to fix it.
What do you think of the Democratic presidential candidates?
I don't know. I think, talking about the lesser two evils,
Yeah, that's definitely.
Well, there were 20. Right, or something like that. So
too many.
Lesser of a few.
Yep. I think there's still just a lot of them are still out of touch. Still career politicians. I'm not a fan of career politicians, but I still vote, and I always will, and I'll find one that I can land on. But that's just the thing. I feel like I'm at their mercy on who they decide on.
I'm trying to look at it like. There's something about each of them that I can get behind and appreciate. None of them are going to be perfect, but it's almost like I voted that way last time, and I didn't want to because I felt like Bernie Sanders was robbed of the nomination by the construct within the Democratic National Convention, and I think there's some serious corruption in that.
I think there's some fishy shit on both sides for sure.
Yeah.
And I think the way that I definitely I feel like in retrospect, having read about the election results and the propaganda that was put into social media, I definitely feel like I was micro-targeted as a person who, if I was angry enough at Hillary Clinton for any number of reasons, real or imagined, that I would maybe not go vote for her.
Right.
And then when I went to go vote, it was, and not to be conspiracy theorists, but it was really odd how a lot of people in my precinct were openly and verbally complaining to the precinct people that their political affiliation had been altered. And so the ballot they were given in California was different.
Right.
And it was like everything, it was just everything went wrong either by hook or by crook. And if she had won, based on the sort of the psychological operations, I think, that were going on, I would not have felt good about it. I would have been like, oh, great, we're going to have never-ending war again. Again, she's kind of in that the neoliberal or neoconservative, it doesn't matter, doctrine of, hey, let's keep the battles.
Yeah,
going.
and it certainly can't be discredited. And that's the thing that's ridiculous to me is that people are still saying about the Russian troll farms and, oh, I mean, come on, that's a stretch. Nobody convinced me to revive Russia. Of course, it's like, no, when you look at the way they were planning out the long game on those situations and the algorithms that they used, I mean,
it was brilliant.
And John, I will say this: I really wanted a woman to win, just for the purpose of, like, let's shatter the glass ceiling and, like, let's have women be able to move as much political muscle as they represent in our society. My God, and they're going to. It's happening.
And with that, that psychological switch, it wasn't just about promoting the Republican candidate. It was just about splitting the already kind of divided liberal camp as well, and just
divide and conquer,
right? Just finding little things to say. Well, as like kind of infiltrating with they would develop like a profile for let's say it's an LGBTQ individual, and it would just be an innocuous, seemingly normal, person who just shares memes, things like that. It's a totally fake account. But then over the course of time, just little influences, just like, 3 or 4 months may go by. They may just talk about, okay, there's going to be an event at this coffee house or whatever, or, hey, I really like this song by so-and-so or whatever. And then it's, oh, did you hear the thing that Hillary Clinton said today about, as a gay person, I don't know that I could really stand behind that. And maybe, and then it was
just kind of a Trojan horse,
and it was fracturing everything to the point that they knew that maybe they may not be able to get them to flip entirely, but they knew that they could fracture the vote, that they could splinter it out enough, that just keep splitting the vote.
Well, what else is fascinating about it to me now that I've kind of tried to steer my artistic musical career back into public domain or whatever. I recently paid Facebook $25 to show, find a bunch of people. That's how we met.
Oh yeah.
Right? Oh, you like Weezer? Click below, right? Or whatever. And I realized after doing that, or while doing that, how easy it is to access hundreds of millions of people.
Wow. Huh. Might be So you think it was well spent? It's worth your $25?
Well, we're doing this, right?
Yeah, well, we're thinking about options for ourselves, We've been doing this 9 months now, maybe something like that.
Is it that long? Has it been the gestation of a child?
I think we started, we went online in March, maybe.
Okay.
That's beautiful. Congratulations, you guys. It's a good run.
And we're not huge by any stretch. I wouldn't even call us big yet. I'm throwing in the yet for myself. But we're working at it, man. We're really working at it.
Well, I think what's important to notice now in the new digital age that we're in is that the old way of doing it as we grew up, which seemed to be a little bit more organic, or a lot more organic, depending on if you were like promoting a band, or you had, a radio show or whatever. It was like it just went out across the airwaves, or it didn't, right? And if it didn't go out across the airwaves, whether radio or television, well, then you maybe passed out flyers.
Right. And now you've got another
or,
option. And how cool is that?
Yeah. And to really embrace that, as, middle-aged men, middle-aged people, to go, well, how does this work? And to learn something new that is kind of taken for granted by the kids of this age. My 18-year-old daughter is like, oh, you don't know how that works? And she explains it to me, and I still don't understand. And then she fixes it on my phone or whatever. And I'm like, okay, I'm turning into an old person. Oh, well.
Yeah. And we're still figuring out a lot. We're actually working up, trying to bring on somebody that is a little bit more proficient.
Yes.
With some of those things, and realizing we got no money for you right now. If we get somewhere, we'd love to share.
Right. But we need them to get somewhere. That's the problem. I mean, we're terrible at self-promotion. And I in some ways, I like the fact that we're not monetized, that, we're not beholden to, any sort of advertiser or anything like that. And, but, in other ways, it's just like the monster's getting bigger. We're getting better and better guests all the time. We're getting busier and busier and busier all the time. And it's like, it costs money to do this, but we just don't know. I mean, we're terrible promoters of ourselves. We don't know what we're doing there.
Well, you guys have the souls of artists, clearly, and it's important as an artist. I think we need to support each other, and this could be kind of our little, like, how do we support each other as artists? I think having a team, building a team, whatever that means. So, because you have your art, you have your artists, you have your audience, basic like information technology, the sender, the message, the receiver, and the acknowledgement. Right. And then, it's like whether it's a band or a podcast or whatever, in order for it's going to grow organically at a certain, it'll have its like exponentiation. And then you get to this point where you're like, well, what else can we do? And will we enjoy doing that? And I think part of the trick, I honestly think that, just at a vibrational level, as far as like, where your consciousnesses are as creatives and where mine is as creatives and where we are in our walks of life, how, we almost have the same birthdays, right?
Yeah. We're like, 4 days apart? Is that?
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
I think it's important to kind of support each other in terms of, hey, it's time to try new things. It's time to really embrace the new and dive in. And my friend David, who's kind of managing me, David Scaff, he's doing a fabulous job of like getting me shows booked and like just challenging me to get out there. And, he's my number one. He's my team member, before the band I play with. Like I need him, and he continues to challenge me to do better and to try more things. And we have this joke about just jump off the high dive. You don't have to dive. Just jump off.
And that's kind of what we're doing right now. And it sounds like that's what you're doing right now. And what I think John and I are finding, there are a lot of people kind of trying that right now. Yeah. And what a cool community to have, and absolutely. We do now. I'm going to this will be the online, deadheads. Like we're setting up a family. We're going to take care of each other. But it's starting to feel like that, at least to me. I don't know, John, if you have the same feeling.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And, and seeing like listens all over the world and everything else like that. And like working with one artist and then they want contact info from another and then you find out they're collaborating together. And it's like, wow, that might not have happened if it wasn't for the fact that they were both on, the show. And it's like, we think about things all the time where it's like, these are some people I used to watch music videos when I was 16. I would have never thought that I was going to, that they'd be wishing, they'd be wishing my daughter a happy birthday or whatever one day.
That's so cool.
That's really neat. And we don't want to lose that. And I think that, that's the big thing. It's not just about not selling out. It's that we just don't want to lose the authenticity of it. But we also think it's like, how much is getting away from us that we could just, grow even more if we just had if we knew how to manipulate just think outside of the box with the social media thing.
Well, there's this simple concept that I'm learning about, or this marketing term in social media that I'm picking up, and I think Adobe is kind of at the heart of it. I think they kind of coined the phrase, but it's the lookalike audience, and I think the basic dynamics of it, as I understand, are you will create a business manager page with Facebook so that you can buy advertisements, and then you'll create an ad campaign where you have some sort of offering. You're like, hey, if you like so and so, you might like us, and then you make a list of who the so and so's are and what the data then that's collected by the company, by Facebook, let's say, for example. They'll say, oh, you think that you're like these people. Okay, we're going to go out and find people who have a click history of liking and following through on liking those artists or those podcasts or those whatever it is you are. And we're going to put your offering in front of them, and you're going to pull in a certain number, and you're going to agree to pay no more than 25 or 50 or $100 to do it. And then you're going to look at how much it costs you per person at the end of it.
Right.
And then it becomes like a game to, well, how can I get it from 33 cents per person down to 10 cents per person or whatever. And so you make your offering better, you see like, oh, well, you got more people who were like, who like this artist or this podcast than that artist or that podcast. So you should focus on more people who like that. And it gives you purer data.
So it narrows it down every time.
So you can then have a more efficient look-alike audience that you build. And it's no different than when people would pay an independent promoter to then go pay payola to a radio programmer to play this list of songs.
Right.
It's kind of,
Or, it's just using the tools and to step back from the, but that's not natural or organic enough. It's like, well, it is. It's just using the tools.
Right. Yeah. I mean, air conditioning wasn't natural or organic either, but then nobody's complaining about not using it just due to that fact. It's just, that's the thing. I think it's like even the music industry, and it's like we've talked before about, we had a young band on here who just, we were trying to talk to them about how the scene was, and Sharp Star about how the scene was in Kentucky. They're like, we don't really know. We just went straight online. And we don't really play local shows, and we don't really play, we're not part of a scene. We have a group of fans who like our sound, and it's based on those sort of things. If you like so-and-so, like through Bandcamp, if you like so-and-so, you'll check out these guys, etc. So yeah. And we've been turned on to so many bands that way, but it's just amazing.
Do you guys have So Far Sounds in your
no, I'm not familiar with what this is.
Yeah.
You guys will like that.
What is it exactly?
So Far Sounds is I think it's two British guys who basically created a living room concert app.
Okay.
And I think what happened, I'm going to go and do it as an artist really soon, and just start using this network. And I guess Virgin put like $20 million in Fuse, just gave them like a grant. Like, here you go. Go be like, this will keep you afloat. This will be your foundation. And so what happens is you sign up as a host, or you sign up as an audience member, or you sign up as an artist. And so maybe 25 or 30 people will show up at a private venue, and they'll all leave their phones in like a basket in the hall. And then an artist or two or three will play for them privately. And everybody gets the artists all get paid, and the venue gets a little bit of money too to cover expenses. And it's happening in something like 400 cities.
I'm just pulling it up. They got it in KC.
Do they?
Yeah.
Huh. Cool. I mean, we've had living room shows have been going around for a while here, but nothing marketing them that way, as far as I know. But yeah, that's interesting. I can remember even the first time I heard about it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, hearing about the Bottle Rockets playing a living room show. And I mean, I guess, DIY punk bands and stuff have done that for years, just playing in people's basements, but not as a way to, market themselves or work with it that way. So that's pretty cool.
But just to make gas money
Yeah.
and get to the next
Mm-hmm.
town.
Yep. It's usually
right?
what it was there. Yep. Or a place to stay. You know.
That's a noble pursuit, right? That real troubadour fashion of we're just going to find a place to play and they're going to give us a little bit of money and we're going to survive and continue
Yep.
onward.
You get to do what you like to do, but boy, you get hungry. Yeah.
Right. But man, we've got some of the best stories listening to people telling us about those experiences.
Those are, that's where the magic really happens, right? That's where that sort of that organic thing that we're all looking for in terms of, connection, community, music, and everything that goes around it it's you don't have to show an ID to get in. You're not there to drink or to pick up on your preference of possible mate. You're there for the music, and that's it. It's just so gritty and real in that way. And it's like going to church in a way, right? I mean, it's a similarity there to a good rock show.
It's just
a good
following
service.
the digital dead. Yeah. Interesting stuff.
You guys are cool. This is a fun
conversation. Then this is what we do. Basically.
I love it.
We, of course, want to give everybody a little bit of background so they know who the hell we're talking to. But other than that,
sure.
We
don't have any agenda for where any conversation is going to go. We really,
I dig it. Yeah, it's very free form. It feels like there's nothing off limits here. It's a safe space.
Yeah, it's undetermined. That's part of it. It's in the name, right?
I love it.
We don't know where we're going to go.
Yeah.
But we definitely touched on some varying subjects.
Yeah, and we really, it's more interesting that way, in my opinion. Plus, you don't have to stress out so much. What are we going to talk about? I don't know. We'll figure it out.
I do feel relaxed. Yeah, I don't feel like as as excited to talk about Weezer, though that is cool and fun and exciting. But
sure,
it's calm,
right? And you know what? We'd love to hear Weezer stories, but we just want to get to know you.
Sure.
That's first and foremost. If Weezer stories come out of it, awesome. If they don't, well, maybe another time. That's
sure. No, I've got one. I've got a brand new Weezer story that actually happened today. As a matter of fact,
breaking.
So there's a band from back in the day in like the early Weezer scene, if you will, Los Angeles, early 90s, nightclubs, whatnot. There was a band back then called the Campfire Girls.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
Really cool band. They had a huge buzz, really cool guys, a trio. And the drummer of the Campfire Girls is a guy named John Pikus, who would be a great guest for Undetermined. And John Pikus was a man about town in the music industry in the early 90s. He was a scout or had like a consultation. He was a consultant for like A&R people because he was always in clubs and finding new bands. And I had lunch with him today. He works at a magazine that's in the music business in Hollywood. And we were catching up because we're old friends. And this is the guy who made the last recording of Weezer before the Blue Album was made.
Okay.
That got shopped to the record labels and got the band the deal.
So put them on the map.
Yeah, and he basically finagled some free studio time in a garage that belonged to a kind of a wealthier kid who just had enough money to like put carpet on the walls and get a tape machine and a mixer and a few mics. And John had access to the studio, and he invited Weezer to come in and record like 4 songs. And we did. And it was this fabulous little recording that got the interest going. So I credit him with, John Pikus is to me one of the unsung heroes of the discovery of this.
Thank you.
Thank you, John Pikus.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, John, come on Undetermined.
Yes. Cool. Would love to.
He's got some great stories.
Tom Waits.
Probably. Yeah.
At this point, I kind of have this dream that if we can get enough guests that have met Tom Waits and have a story about me and him, because this is I think you're our third or fourth that has talked about encounters with Tom
Close
Waits.
Encounters with Tom.
If we keep collecting those and just I'm going to put them all together as one big episode sometime.
Yeah.
Just be like, Tom, come on, man.
Yeah. No, it's a foregone conclusion. Just keep going. It's just going to get exponentiated into.
Yep, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
It's coming.
You can't come on unless you've hung out with Tom Waits.
Well, everybody who comes on will have Tom. I mean,
7
degrees. There's a way. There's just
7 degrees of separation from Tom Waits. It's out there. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's it's not like we're just total fanboys of Tom Waits either. It just happens to be the guy who comes up with the story every time.
Right, it's totally random.
He's like the Kevin Bacon of your podcast.
Well, I've thought about it, and it may be just because we keep talking to Bay Area bands, and he record artists
or Texas bands, and then it's the Toadies that comes into the other part of that.
Oh yeah, the Toadies. Yeah, they're amazing. They're kind of a one-hit wonder in terms of how they're known, but they're great.
Yeah. Well, we're friends with all the original members of the Toadies, sans Todd.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I did message him the other day though. I did. Just thought of him just to see if Todd.
Just see what happened.
I wish I had more Toadies stories. I remember being around them as they were coming up. I don't know if they were like working with who are the producers? Was it Rob Schnapf?
I'm sure Lisa could tell us.
Yeah, Lisa could tell us, I'm sure. But there were some lineup changes too.
Tom Rothrock and Rob Schnapf. Those guys were really important producers. They did Beck's Mellow Gold, which was one of his early big records. And they were making records in Los Angeles, and I remember the Toadies kind of like coming through and working with them. And, I remember wanting to work with those guys to make a record in my post-Weezer time because of the way that Toadies records sounded.
Very sincere music. Well, I always loved Toadies. And it's really kind of it's sort of a funny little story, but it's kind of how we went down this path. We initially just wanted to do this to just record it for posterity, amuse ourselves. And I asked I just tagged Lisa Umber, the original bassist, founding bassist, was like, she's always been one of my favorite bass players. It'd be great if she'd do the show sometime, maybe after we get off the ground a little bit, and just tagged her. And I was a friend, just as a fan friend. And she, and then commented just a few minutes later, she was like, I'm down. Sounds like a lot of fun.
And
we were like, okay.
Yeah, it's like beam me up, Scotty.
Right. And then it was like we got bit with a bug, just like, that wasn't that hard and it was fun.
Yeah.
Let's try this again.
That's brilliant.
And then some of the great things about social media is if you don't have to deal with a handler, if you don't have to deal with a label, it's just message me. And it's like, you're messaging people directly that you just never thought you'd have access to. But now that you have those methods, it's just amazing. Some of the people that I've been told no or too busy by a few people. Just the fact that I had a conversation with them is pretty incredible to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is a democratization of communication in the internet.
Right.
That it was definitely not there before.
Right.
There are some bright spots and places or ways where the technology is helping, hopefully.
Right. I'm not a Luddite by any means. I just think it's all in how you use it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just be good, right? Don't be a dick.
Right. It's not hard. Don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Really? It is that simple though.
It really can be. Yeah.
It may matter more and more to our species as we go forward. I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
We're evolving and devolving at the same time.
Right. Well, there's a power to that. There's some short-term gains to being a dick sometimes, but I think people are starting to realize that more and more, that it is a short-term gain. It's not going to get you that far.
Don't be a short.
What do you guys?
Right.
What do you guys do in your personal lives, if you don't mind me asking, to help be less of a dick, to be a nicer person? Like, do you have practices or habits or?
Well, my job, my personal job, I'm a self-contained special education teacher. I work with kids with autism.
Oh
I
wow.
been doing that for years. We all work in some sort of
Right.
social mental health field.
I work. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one thing I do. But I mean, just little things, common courtesy, engaging people, and even on this podcast, we tried to do. And it's kind of funny how you said earlier how you were kind of pussyfooting around whether or not we're going to engage in that political conversation. It's like
Mm.
we've we had one episode where we brought on some of our conservative friends and trying to talk to them, but I think just more and more, I'm finding we can all get up in our camps and we can all rattle our sabers,
Right.
against each other. But unless we can, it's difficult. But unless we can find a way to talk to people about this, and I hate the term agree to disagree, but just
Sometimes you have to, though.
find that we're all people, and find that we're not these icons on a Facebook or avatars.
Right.
In
So
a,
maybe instead of agree to disagree, more of a agree to find things to agree on.
or agree to engage.
Mm.
You know, just we've got to find something to talk about. I think that's the most important thing. When people find that when they're exposed to people and they find that they are human regardless of their disagreements, it helps relationships immensely. I mean, in my personal experience, I find that so with racism, for example, I find the worst cases of racism when people just plain aren't exposed to people of other races. You know,
Mm-hmm.
whether even if they eventually stick to their guns and say, "Yep, that's kind of what I felt all along," the myths that people put up around themselves about the unknown is just. I think that's what needs to break down. That's one of the biggest things I'm working on.
Sure.
Right. Just
Yeah.
try. I try to educate.
Mhm.
I think, and I try really hard. And even when I know this is probably going to be 100% fruitless,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? I don't do it a ton because it drains me. But every now and then, I'll have the very conservative cousin or uncle or somebody, will make just a very ignorant and hateful post.
Mhm.
Right. And they don't even realize how wrong what they're posting is or why it's wrong. And I will take the time to tell them in a nice way, as the
Right.
nicest way possible. And I will lay it out without pointing fingers. I might start it just to get their attention. Like, okay, it's a little hypocritical. I'll point my finger there. But then I'll go into, okay, you want to really have a conversation? Let's have a conversation.
Right. And you bring out but you're not, it sounds like there's a willingness to be healthy as opposed to needing to be right.
Right. Well, and I think too, one thing that's kind of stuck with me lately, and this is just something that I've been thinking about probably about the last month. I heard Penn Jillette talking about on another podcast, and he was talking about people whose political ideas he's opposed, or he's an unabashed atheist, for example, and he's saying he's trying more and more to refer to everyone that he talks about, even if he disagrees with them, that they are one of us, and saying that,
Mm.
which one of us are saying these sorts of things, or, why are we doing that? And we have to accept that we're all part of the same collective, we're all human beings, we're all on the planet. So we're all part of history. It's not just I'm part of this camp or that camp. It's
Yeah, that is important as opposed to exclusivity
right.
or divisiveness or some sort of
Yeah.
whatever the differentiators are.
So I've been trying to do that more and more lately. It's difficult, especially when you look at some monstrous things that people do. But if you look at it and you say, why are we doing this? As opposed to saying, why are they doing this?
Right.
That's
That's
an important thing. Yeah. I can't take credit for it. This Pendulette really got the idea going.
No, it's a good idea.
But yeah, I think the more we do that and take ownership of the fact that, of the human race and say that, we're all in this together. And
yeah, this planet is a life raft and we're all refugees.
Right. Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
We need refuge, and there's a very thin layer of atmosphere that we all operate in, and water, and it's.
So let's make it as comfortable for everyone as possible.
Right.
That seems, yeah, and the rules and the societal norms or the laws or the customs or the romantic notions of I don't know how it ought to be or was or should be. There's always room for improvement.
Right. And we're never going to get them all, or not everybody's ever going to be under the same tent. I mean, that's just the thing. It's one thing I'm working on, trying to look at more every day. It's just us.
And I also try to remember as somebody that is more progressively minded that eventually history has shown consistently the progressive mind wins. It takes time.
Or it pendulates, either way. It swings back and forth, but seems to be the point of recovery in a lot of cases,
Right, but
it's like a wave will go, there's a crest and a trough.
Right.
It's not a direct shot. It's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, right? But it's still moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, apparently, the present moment continues to repeat itself over and over again, and different things happen. And so there's a progressive as opposed to a regressive or a conservative. I don't know. The language starts to break down in terms of serving how we as a species, if you will, are going to evolve or grow or change. Mm-hmm. One thing that I've noticed in these last few years of raising my kids up into adults is, and I don't know if there's a direct linkable correlation in this data, but as the screen time use and handheld data use have gone up statistically, you can superimpose suicide attempts and self-harm, especially amongst teenagers, but I think in other categories of how you would measure people, demographics, if you will. And I think there's a really important connection in the disconnect from each other into this virtual like handheld, like my whole world is in my hand. And I see the kids walking home from high school in our hometown, and their neck is at like a 90-degree angle. And they're looking down at their hand, and they're walking across the street, and they don't even. It's like as soon as they see the light changes, or so the people around them start walking, they just start walking. I'm like, man, that's really scary. That's a serious disconnect. You're trusting people you're not even going to look at or know to be in charge of your safety, because they might be looking at their phone too.
Right. And the weird thing too, just talking about like the online bullying and things like that, it's this disconnect as people, but then the level of engagement that they have is so much higher than it ever has been.
Yeah.
Everyone in their school is commenting on their picture or their,
but from the safety of an anonymous or a seemingly disconnected, you don't have to say it to their face. You're just going to, it doesn't matter.
So they're ingesting all of this, but it's still just so disconnected. It's the things that would never be said to their face or and that's another thing. It's very difficult to do when you've got that platform, and God, especially as a kid, trying to make sure also that as I say things online, they're things that I wouldn't have a problem saying to.
It's an important distinction that I think a lot of us have lost track of.
I'm thankful that some of this didn't happen sooner, just for selfish reasons. Honestly, just because I don't know how I'd have dealt with it. If I would have I know I'd have done some things that, looking back, I'd regret, and I know there are gonna be a lot of kids that are doing things right now that in 20 years they're gonna be like, "Oh my God, I did that," and the whole world saw it.
Oh yeah,
the whole world. It's still there.
It's still there. I can't get rid of it.
Oh well, I mean, shit. Yeah, I mean, I'm talking a good game about all these great ideas, but it's not like I don't even say anything like 2 nights ago when I had too many beers and I'm like, oh shit, you know, God, maybe I
Uh,
shouldn't have put it that, maybe we shouldn't take it that far.
what's funny about music in this context, right? Is you go to a concert and you have all these people together, and I've been to concerts. I remember going to one at the Hollywood Bowl. I don't remember who it
Mhm.
was. It was somebody, it was like the Eagles or a great band, I'm
Right.
sure, but just as a guest of someone else. And there were people talking to. I remember there were two women talking behind me, and they would not stop
Mhm.
talking. And eventually I turned around and I said, I'm so sorry to say this, but could you save this conversation till after the concert? Because I just want to listen to the music. Like if you
Right.
really want to just talk, like just go to the like the little grassy area by the
Mhm.
bathroom and just you can still hear the music from there, but I won't have to. And they're like, oh my God, it's so mean. You're such a dick or whatever. And
Yeah.
I was like,
Ugh.
I'm sorry. I don't know how to say it in a
Yeah.
nice way. I just want to hear the music.
No.
Yeah.
But I think that the disconnect that kids are feeling, or that people who are disenfranchised or are not born into privilege, and I can't speak for them, but I hope that music like still is going to continue to bring us all together. I mean, it's certainly why I've been drawn back into it. I just, like my best friends are just such music heads, and they're like,
Mhm.
Jason, you're from Weezer, and I'm like, yeah, I'm just some guy who played in a band a long time ago. And they're like, no, you got to play music again. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, come on, do it. And I'm like, why? And they're like, because it's
Mhm.
amazing. And I'm like, what? Music is
It
amazing.
is.
It does bring people together. It's like
It
this
really does.
thing that, in a way that almost nothing else
Yeah.
does.
I think we'll
I
always have that as long as it still gives people goosebumps.
sure.
When they hear that riff that it gets them going, or they hear that lyric that's just like over the top. I think it always will. I hope it always will.
It's so
Mhm.
important, right?
I've got some of my big Republican friends, man, throw on the right song and our arms are going to be over each other's shoulders
Right.
and we're going to be just screaming it out together.
Yeah, I agree. It crosses party and cultural and religious and gender lines. It just brings people together into a singular consciousness in a way that almost nothing else does.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Some visual art, perhaps, but that's always, I don't know. I've always, and I love visual art, but I think music more so, uh, you know, for that.
Well, the two combined, right? I mean, if you're like
Mhm.
looking at Mick Jagger shaking his
Right.
ass, next to whomever. I mean, there's some visual art
Right.
there, while the music is playing.
And the lights, the backdrop, the album cover,
Sure.
all those things. But yeah, as long as
Yeah.
it keeps sending those goosebumps down our skin, I think we're always going to have that. I hope so. I hope we can lean more.
There's another artist I would like to share with you
Uh-huh.
guys. I think that you would really enjoy having on the show. He's before I played in Weezer, I played in a band in Northern California with a guy named Eric Lindell. Let's see, Lindell, and he is out of Florida now.
Okay.
But he consistently tours and puts out records, and it's like an Americana blues. He does some funky
Hmm.
stuff too. He's in a band called Dragon Smoke with one of the Neville brothers, I
Oh,
Huh.
think, as a side project. And he's just a brilliant musician, guitar, bass, drum, like leader of a band, arranges horn sections and stuff. But you guys would dig this guy. He's the real thing. He's a true American, like working musician.
Eric Lindell.
And he doesn't do the micro targeting. He doesn't do the algo. He doesn't use the code. He's a true organic, dyed in the wool type of
We'll
thing.
definitely check him
Huh.
out. Yeah, we'll definitely do
Yeah.
that. We like those types of folks. Got quite a few of them here in Missouri
Yeah.
too that come through. So
Oh yeah, he probably comes
he
through
might.
Missouri.
Yeah.
One nice thing about being in the middle, you have a good shot
Yep.
at somebody passing through.
Hmm. Yep. You might not get them every weekend, but yeah.
You don't get much more center of the map than Kansas City,
Right.
where I'm at. That can be nice.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's it. Let's see. We played in St. Louis
Mm-hmm.
as Chopper One in '97, I believe, and it was a great show. I was really thrilled with St. Louis is a kind of a melting pot town.
Yeah.
Right? Wouldn't you say that? It
Yeah,
describes-
and we're starved for good entertainment in the Midwest too. That's another thing. You get good crowds here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. You get somebody up there who's like having a good time on stage, and everybody in the bar is having a good
No,
time.
and
pretty much.
yeah, to the point that sometimes we don't handle it
Yeah.
well.
What is that like?
The Guns N' Roses riot, I guess, that's a good example.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Don't take away our rock and roll, Axel.
Right. Or what was the story? Going to Counting Crows. This was one I experienced. Well, going to Counting Crows in Springfield, Missouri, and a mosh pit breaks out. Right, and there's like stage diving and moshing and like at a Counting Crow, Mr. Jones.
That's great.
And Adam Duritz has to like stop the show and be like, get off the fucking stage.
That's funny. He's like, this is an organized event. This is a grown up. We don't have the insurance for this.
And I'm just like sitting there like Counting Crow.
That's amazing. Wow.
Well, it was probably, like hitting the moniker was probably the most alternative thing that came through that, for that couple of weeks or whatever, as far as the show goes, and was played on college radio. So
people were really ready
and beyond that, we don't know how to react. And it's like,
but they're so starved that reaction can be really big. Like we saw 9 Inch Nails. Man.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a show. Those guys put on quite a show. I have a 9 Inch Nails story. So, you know who Josh Freese is? So Josh Freese is a drummer from Southern California who has played probably on more records than most other session musicians combined at this point. His father was the leader of the Disneyland marching band, and he got, as soon as Josh could walk, he put a snare drum on him and strapped it to him and would have him march in the parade and play paradiddles and, do the marching stuff. And so he's literally been playing in a band since before he could talk. And he plays in Vandals. He plays with Sting. He plays with 9 Inch Nails. He plays with Devo. He tours with Weezer sometimes. A lot of bands, but even more sessions for recording. He's very good. Perfect Circle.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Okay, so this is in 1990. This is in like 2000. And I'm working at the recording studio in Hollywood. And Josh is, at this point, he was the drummer for Guns N' Roses. And Tommy Stinson was the bass player.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And Josh is in the studio doing some sessions for a record producer of one sort or another. And we meet in the hallway and he's like, "Hey, how's it going?" He's like, "I see you here all the time." I'm like, "Yeah." "What's your name?" "Oh, my name's Jason." "Oh yeah. What do you do, Jason?" I'm like, "Well, I used to play in the band Weezer. Maybe you heard of him." He's like, "No way. You're the guy who started Weezer and Brian Bell were playing?" Yeah. He knew who I was. And I was like, wow, he knows his shit. And he was like, "Hey, well, a day later, he's like, 'Hey, are you making any music now?' And I was like, 'Yeah, as a matter of fact, I've been writing songs and I'm, thinking about making a record here.' And he was like, 'Cool, bring me a recording of it.' So I give him a cassette of 10 songs that I had just been doing in my... So I gave Josh a cassette and then he comes back. He calls me like 2 weeks later. He's like, "I really like your record." I was like, "Oh yeah?"
Right.
Like, "I want to do it." And I was like, "Oh, Josh, I don't have $1,000 a song or whatever it is you normally make." He's like, he said, "You can't tell anybody about this for a long time."
Right.
So I figure it's been like 20 years, so I can talk about it now. It's just, "Josh, if you're mad, I'm sorry." So every once in a while, I will find a project that I want to do, and then I'll just do a freebie for the person. And all you got to do is pay the drum doctor $200 to set up my drums and get a recording studio. And so he came in and he made this amazing record for me,
Nice.
on a weekend, and all I did was just buy him like Del Taco and Marlboro Reds.
Nice.
And I put out this was like when Napster started
Right.
to take off, so it was like I don't know what to do. Like the record industry is just falling apart, and I was busy raising my kids, so I didn't really promote it or tour behind it or anything. But there's a couple little samples of it out there. There's a song you guys can look up that I did called Baggy Shorts that he plays on. That's really fun. And then the really fun part about it was years later, he went out on the road with Weezer and did a bunch of tours with them. And I was like, I'm the first guy in Weezer to play with Josh first.
Yeah.
Out there first.
Yeah. Got ahead of the game. Oh, that's cool. Huh.
He's a special musician. I think that anybody who's listening to this podcast, if you want to, get more in touch with like what makes rock great, you've got to know your Josh Freese talking points. He's just one of the greatest living musicians.
We'll have to go back through. Yeah, I used to sit and talking with some people if I didn't hear about it with like a pad, and paper, and a pen, but. I just realized why I'm recording this. I can go back and listen to it again. But we'll certainly check out everybody that you referred us to. Yeah, that's an amazing story. Nine Inch Nails was really incredible there. Came there a couple times, but the Shrine Mosque was a really good show.
Oh yeah.
Do you need to wrap it up pretty soon?
Yeah.
I should hit the sack. I'm going to try to catch a yoga class out here in the morning. I would like to get some rest before that.
Oh, man, it's been a blast.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we've had a blast.
It's been a real pleasure with you.
Yeah,
guys.
Thanks for coming on. Thanks for being willing to turn around and do it so quickly, too. Just got a hold of you a couple days ago, so that's great.
Yeah, my pleasure.